Livecast. Welcome to the Livecast. Welcome to the show. Livecast. Welcome to the Livecast. Welcome to the show.
Well, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Livecast. Hopefully you can all hear us here. Hope everyone's doing okay and enjoying the weather. We're sitting out here in the back garden. If you've been like us, you've had lots of heat over the last few days, and then suddenly terrible storm. So actually we're glad that the weather's got nice again and we're able to be outside. Just to give you a bit of I can't even think of the word now. Heads up. Oh, no, feedback. That's it, feedback. Gone to pieces already. Feedback. So I mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, that I was speaking in Eastbourne last week at All Saints Eastbourne at their youth events. Just say thank you for everyone that kind of prayed for that. Those were the talks that were themed around The Greatest Showman. And that was lots of fun. Really lovely group. So thank you for those who prayed, and do keep praying for them. They've finished now, but obviously there's kind of follow-up and stuff. Hopefully they've had a good crowd. Well, they did have a good crowd. But let's pray that people who came along will keep coming back to the youth group and stuff like that. I hope you guys have been enjoying all the different interviews. If you've not caught up with them, if you've missed some of them, you can still see them on Facebook. If you go to our page, facebook.com/SpeakLifeUK, and the video section, there should be a playlist of the live casts, and they're all in there. Or you can pick them up on YouTube in the same playlist. Now, some of you might have heard me say last week that I was going to be speaking to Bertie. Now, unfortunately, he's not been able to make it because something's come up. But you're in no way being shortchanged because I'm really glad that I've got the very wonderful Luke Sedge here with me today. Luke, hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good. Thank you for coming. You're very welcome. And Luke has pretty much stepped in at the 11th hour here. So, we're doubly thankful that we've got Luke. Because actually you don't want to hear me just ramble for 45 minutes by myself, which I would have done. But also, so not only because you don't want to hear that, but actually Luke's got a great story as well. So we'll chat to Luke in a second. Just to say that if you're watching live now, you can type any questions and comments kind of throughout, and we'll try and pick those up and keep an eye on them. If there's specific questions, I might ask Luke at the end, or if they're very pertinent at the time, I'll ask them as we go. So I'll try and keep on top of that if you've got questions. But let's have a chat with Luke. Luke, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about who you are and what is it you do?
I'm Luke Sedge, a member of All Saints Church in Crowborough, and I currently work for London Fire Brigade. And have done for the last 21 years.
Wow, yeah. Great. And kind of family?
Married to Teresa, wonderful lady, and have two daughters, Ella and Lana.
Brilliant, great. And so you've been a Christian now for, is it kind of just over 2 years?
Just over 2 years.
Just over 2 years, because it was kind of Easter time, I think, wasn't it? You said. And we've had lots of people kind of that we've talked to, and a lot of them have been raised kind of in Christian families with kind of Christian background. And you've actually kind of come to faith a bit later in life, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's just wind the clock back a bit first, and find out a bit about your background. So tell us kind of what it was like for you. What was life like growing up? What was it like? What were you like, I suppose?
Okay, so I was brought up in South London. I was born in a town called Beckenham, and then shortly moved to a place called Lewisham. Went to St Mary's primary school in Lewisham, and that was a Christian church, or a Church of England school. My parents split was quite young, which was quite tough. Growing up, shortly after the split, we moved to Penge, which is another sort of little village or town in South London. Yep. We lived with our grandparents above a fish and chip shop, which was quite interesting. Yeah. But yeah. Memories, some really fond memories, some not so fond memories about growing up. Me and my brother were pretty feral, to be fair.
Yeah. See, I just can't imagine you being feral, Luke. That's the thing.
The nice hair is nothing.
Yeah.
Don't be fooled by the
Cleans
hair.
up well.
It cleans up well. But yeah, it was. We was loved. We had a loving family. Grandparents supported us. Mum remarried to my wonderful stepdad Ray. But there was, ups and downs.
Don't worry, you were.
I guarantee that's one of my work colleagues. Yeah, it was. looking at the
In
live
fairness,
feed.
I just realised I haven't put my phone on silent either, so that's my bad.
Comedy value. So yeah, grew up in Penge.
And so you're saying, you were, you know, a little bit feral or not. Tell us a bit about your character. I mean, what?
We pretty much go out when the sun came up and come home when it got dark, or when Mum sent out a search party to try and find us on a few occasions.
Yep.
Just generally. Stick of the dump comes to mind in terms of just doing.
And that's when you were kind of kids, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and when we was young, touching on my experience or brief encounter with Christianity or the church was my mum used to send us off to Sunday school when we was in Lewisham, and the guy used to pick us up in the minibus and take me and my brother. We'd go for the hour or two, come home, and that was it. That was as far as it went in terms of church or the Christian life in our family. Although my grandfather was a Catholic, Italian descendant, so,
right.
And my mum is a believer, but that was it. We never went to church.
It was never kind of a real feature in many ways, yeah. No. And then, so kind of as you were a bit older, I mean, you joined the fire service, and tell us a bit about what it's like being in the fire service. What's life like being a fireman? Before I joined the fire service, I mean, I worked as a lifeguard. Right.
I was the Hoff.
I could see that. That would work well. Yeah.
Tight shorts and it was a bad look, but I thought I was the business. And then that closed down, and I ended up being a foundryman at an aluminium foundry in Sydenham, and it was a really dirty, dangerous job, but it's all I could do at the time. I didn't do very well academically at school, and there was sort of a crossroads where I just sort of started thinking about I need to do something differently, and it was a toss up between the Royal Marines and the fire service, and I applied for both, and I remember having a discussion with my mum, and she really didn't want me to become a Marine, and I got offered both, and I went for the fire service, which, looking at paper, I think, even though I wasn't an active Christian then, I think God had a hand in me going down that path or getting into that career. Yeah. And it's made me the person I am today. It's given me a lot of stability in my life in terms of financial, earn a good income, be able to provide for a family. It also has other traits in the fire service back then that you sort of enrolled as a young 20-year-old. I was greener than green, and sort of you can get pulled into all sorts of nonsense at that age because you think it's the way. Sure. And
give us a sense of, I mean, people know that there are particular jobs where they're known, for being a particular environment. What's it like in the fire service? What's the locker room like there and the kind of atmosphere?
I mean, I don't want to paint a bad picture, but the cultural, there has been a massive cultural change in the fire service in terms of when I joined to where it is now.
Right.
It was very much definitely at the station or the era I worked, a sort of a drinking culture where you worked hard, you'd go out as a watch, you'd bond, you'd drink, you'd party, and that was the normal. What I thought was the normal of what that job was. But that has changed. I mean, watches and people in the service still go out and bond together and party and do things together. But it's not as bad as it was.
It's kind of much more professional.
There is. I mean, there's a lot more testing involved now. So if you're foolish enough to go down that route, then you're going to lose your job. So yeah. But it's definitely changed. But at the time, as a young man, you're sort of part of it or swallowed up by it all.
And so kind of, you've described yourself as I don't know if you said it now, but you mentioned it before. A bit of a rebel, you haven't really got any particular church background and stuff, and your only experience is really kind of Christmas and Easter and maybe a bit of Sunday school here and there. And you mentioned earlier, you're married to Teresa and you've got Ella and Lana, and actually it was Lana that kind of set the ball in motion really in kind of you getting involved in church. So kind of how did she come into contact with church, and kind of how did that kind of lead to where we are?
So Lana's had the pleasure of going to St Henry Firma School, which is a Church of England school in Crowborough, and they're very much involved with the church. So Lana was involved in obviously assembly and going to church once a week, So she was introduced to Christ and Christianity from a child's perspective. So they learn about certain aspects of Christianity and the stories, the Bible stories. And she'd come home and she'd tell us about, or retell the stories that she's sort of, I'd be like, oh, that's nice, yeah. But just, never really listened, if that makes sense. It's just my daughter telling me a story, which is pretty bad as a parenting point of view. But it's just...
I think we've all been there.
Yeah. With Peppa Pig and Christ all mixed into one. It's just sort of... It wasn't until, she's got friends that have been members of the church, the Alexanders, and their daughter, Maisie, is a good friend with Lana. And they were inviting Lana to come to church. And sort of Teresa or Zan, I think, mentioned it to Teresa and said, look, we don't mind taking Lana to church if he wants to go, we'll take her along. And that sort of promoted a discussion with, as parents. It was like, well, if Lana wants to go to church, it should be really us taking her, and not another family. And it was an easy decision. It wasn't like we discussed it. Oh no, I don't want to go to church. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
It was a case of let's just take her to church.
She wants to go. Yeah, let's go.
We could sit there. I've been to church before, so no qualms. And so we took her.
Was it? And was it the Chris Dingle the first thing she took you?
Was it Chris Dingle?
Kind of went to. Or is that a later?
It might have been later, but the Chris Dingle one was when Lana frog marched me and Teresa to the very front row of chairs in church, and being a non-Christian, I just felt like this beam of light light on me. I was all sweating the old collar, and it was endured it at the time. It was interesting.
And so what, because like you say, you'd been to church a little bit, but it wasn't a huge feature. We've got the RAF display team joining us again today. By the sound of it, like. What were you expecting as you kind of walk into a church? What were your kind of preconceptions of church and Christians, I suppose?
I suppose a lot of my views were pretty stereotypical. I mentioned before that I just presumed I was going to get bashed with the Bible and sort of, not forced or just judged, I think, was one of the things that come to mind. End up sit around a campfire singing Kumbaya, and generally nothing I would a million miles from where I wanted to be.
Yeah, sure. And so what was it like? Was it like that?
Wasn't, no, it wasn't. It totally wasn't. So all these bad ideas in my head. I think the most off-putting thing, it wasn't off-putting, it was something that I wasn't used to, was a complete stranger eagerly shaking my hand and welcoming me into church, literally in my face, and I'm thinking, hold up, I don't know you.
Absolutely.
And the person, if they watch this, will know, and we've laughed about it since. But it was I think I've been a very guarded person most of my life, and not wary of strangers. And when someone comes up to you so happily, and you're thinking,
well, if someone did that in the street, you'd
exactly.
be like, what are you doing? Who's this weirdo? No. I mean, I do think that in church, but
so it was a different experience, definitely. But there's no bad people. That's the thing. It was just a different way of life from what we're used to.
And so you started coming along, and you started kind of coming regularly. Actually kind of came along, and actually then it was around. Well, I think we said it was around Easter time, wasn't it? So am I right to say it was kind of Christmas you came, and then you were kind of around for a few months, and I remember kind of seeing you. There as well, because you when you're in the church the whole time. I think at that point I was probably working at the church, and you recognise new people, turning up. And actually, it was kind of Easter time. I think was it Glenn came and spoke?
Yeah, came and speaking.
And tell us a bit about kind of what happened there.
I think it was the 321 series, and he spoke in depth, and just listening to him. And this is not me bigging you up, Glenn. Well, it is me bigging you up, but it's not because I want to speak life. It was generally what you said that made a difference, and it just normalised Christianity and all the perceptions I sort of had myself about Christians or the Christian faith. He was ticking all his boxes about what he mentions about being broken, making mistakes. How people perceive Christians, and I was even laughing at some, thinking, exactly what I thought. But he was breaking down all these barriers of perceptions of what people think Christians or Christianity is about, and it started making me think more and more about what this Christianity is and who Christ was. So that was really the.
And that kind of resonated with you, the stuff you were
is.
saying then, the idea of, I mean, the broken...
Yeah, the brokenness, and it's a hard pill to swallow. When you start thinking about your own life and how you've behaved and things you've done, it's hard to sort of, and one of the biggest barriers I think of becoming a Christian is for someone to realise just how broken they are and to come to terms with that, but know that there's a way past it. There's a way forward.
Yeah, and you know, you said that then, I mean, kind of what, looking back on your life before, like after you'd become a Christian, you realise kind of now that actually some of the stuff you were doing was really just an attempt to fill a hole kind of thing.
Most definitely. At the time when you're doing it, you don't realise what you're trying to compensate for something that's not there. Whether that be drugs, alcohol, partying, sleeping around. You do these things and you get the quick fix, which is great at the time, but you end up at a point feeling lonely and incomplete. And I think growing up without my father being around, and generally not having a sense of identity in myself, I think I used these vices to try and compensate. And it wasn't until I turned to Christ and you have a chance to reflect on your life and realise that there was a hole, a bottomless pit, the way I could describe it, and you try and keep filling it with the wrong things that I believe are wrong now. But when I turned to Christ, it was that hole was plugged. And that sounds really, well, it's not weird, it's a fact. You know, I felt fulfilled, and those worries and fears and anxieties that I've carried for most of my life were taken.
And what was kind of going on, because obviously you and Teresa have come to church together, and there you are at Easter time kind of having this...
Well, it's 2 for 1, it was a special deal.
Time, so. And that's the amazing thing, isn't it? Because I mean, there are lots of stories, aren't there, of people, of course, who come to faith and actually, you know, maybe they've not been a Christian, their partner's not been a Christian, and you know, then actually that makes life quite difficult. But amazingly, it was only about a week between the two of you, wasn't it?
I think I blubbed and broke down before Teresa because she's a lot stronger than me. But she was feeling it, and when she saw me go, she went as well at the same time. So it's been amazing that we've come to faith as a family, and not just myself and Teresa, but also our eldest daughter Ella. She's a young teenager, and teenagers have enough stress around them, peer pressure and exams and everything else, but then to explain to her friends, or you know, that my parents are now these crazy Christians. So it's just like I was like worried, but we didn't want to push, you know. We'll come to church if we want to, you know. We didn't want to force it upon her at all, but she's a smart kid, and she's now part of the youth group, and on the back of the youth group she made the decision herself to be baptised. So it's been amazing that as a family, all of us together have sort of come to Christ at the same time. But also looking at what happened, it just proves that God had a hand in all of this, because from what we're going to move on to and speak about, He knew what was coming. And He's prepared us by bringing us together.
Well, and so I mean, we've, you know, you're kind of pushing towards that, I guess, talking about what was coming. I mean, when we were talking about kind of you coming to faith, and you said that people told you, well, I think you said you read an article that talks about like there's that honeymoon period where everything's, you know, great, you know, and I guess those of us who can remember a point where we made a decision, you know, we can remember that, and there was that honeymoon period, and you know, the article was kind of saying actually there's that will kind of fade. And actually, you know, being Christian doesn't guarantee that life's going to be easy and stuff will get thrown at you. And actually, you know, the last kind of 2 years for you has been pretty tough, both kind of home and kind of work-wise. Work-wise, let's just chat a bit about that briefly first, because you were actually one of the first people into Grenfell Tower after the fire was extinguished. Is that right?
The cruise,
And just tell us a bit about what your role. I know there's stuff going on still, so I mean you can't get details, but what your role was in kind of being involved in that.
Primarily, it was to safeguard the police that were doing a fantastic job in helping retrieve the lost souls within the tower, and making sure that the building was stable and safe for them to work in. And that went on for 2 weeks between my team at work. We all took turns in going up there pretty much every day to facilitate that. And like I said, I can't get into too much detail because the inquiry is ongoing, but it shook not just my world, but every person that on scene, I think, have been touched in a way that never. Words don't describe. What was there, and.
Because I mean, I think I was saying to you as we chatted about this that, you know, even just sitting at home watching on the TV, as you see it unfolding, and you know, the aftermath of it, you know, it was a really hard thing just to watch from the comfort of your living room, you know, and you know, it certainly made me feel quite emotional just watching it. And there's, you know, I'm watching this as a Christian, and there is that part of me saying, you know, God, how can these terrible things happen? For you, as quite a young Christian, what kind of effect did it have on you and your faith?
It certainly threw that question up about, if God is so amazing, why do we suffer? Why would He want these people to suffer? And it's not an easy question to answer, I don't think. The only thing I have learnt since studying some of the scripture is that us suffering as humans is nothing new. We're told we're going to suffer from a very early point in scripture, that we're going to endure pain. Telling that to a family who just lost their loved ones is not really the answer.
Sure.
But as a Christian, it sort of gives me an understanding of why it's not out of the blue. But also, you know, I prayed massively, very hard for those lost souls, and just prayed that themselves and their family may know Jesus and may have known Him before. You know, they perished. But it's hard. It doesn't take away the pain and the hurt. And that's something we have to endure as humans, unfortunately. But there is hope in knowing that there's something past death.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think you know, when we've talked about suffering a bit before, kind of Glenn and I, on various bits, and you know, obviously we've chatted to other people who've, you know, had some, you know, pretty horrific stories. But I think, you know, actually, if suffering, although it does throw up the questions of, you know, why has this happened, you know, God, and why has this happened to me or to these people? Although it does have those questions, there is that flip side of, well, if there was no God, actually it's completely hopeless. You know, like, you know, you said actually there is hope. If it's completely random and senseless, I think that's far harder to almost process than that there is a God who is in control and loves us, even if we can't understand necessarily the detail of why certain things have happened and stuff. So obviously, you know, that's obviously a very difficult experience. But then also, you know, life at home hasn't been easy. So your mum's been unwell. I think you said she'd had a transplant, a liver transplant, and then was it separate? The cancer she had was a separate.
Part of it was, we think it may have been caused by one of the drugs she was taking. It was like a liver anti-rejection drug that had the risk of producing cancer, and unfortunately she did. Well, she has got cancer, and it's been ongoing. So that's been a hard journey to. Yeah. But Mum has a faith and a belief in Christ, and so that's helped. We've prayed and talked. It doesn't make it easier for the family, but it's almost like the roller coaster of, you know, shortly after she went through her treatment, she went into remission. It was like, you know, praise God, you know, this is amazing that it's gone, and literally within a month or so it'd come back and spread. And she got given weeks, if not months, to live, which is hard to accept and get your head around, thinking, no, Mum's not going to be around for much longer.
Yeah.
But she's just had radiotherapy, and she had results of a test yesterday, and the cancer hasn't grown, hasn't moved, and done anything. And they say it's sort of dormant at the moment.
Yeah.
So we're just thankful that she's comfortable. She's not in any pain. She's functioning amazingly, actually. When you see her, it was just like, wow. So just keep praying that she stays comfortable and has a decent quality of life.
Yeah. And in the midst of all that, kind of Christmas time last year, you kind of get your own diagnosis, don't you, of bowel cancer.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about kind of how that unfolded and what the process was there.
So I started getting symptoms in my stool, which sort of threw up a question, saying it's not quite right.
Yeah.
And ended up going to the doctor and having a chat, and he reassured me there was nothing to worry about, but we're going to have these tests anyway just to make sure. And I went to Pembrokeshire and had a test done, and it showed something up. And I remember sitting in the waiting room afterwards, and the nurse's attitude towards me completely changed from this sort of efficient nurse talking to you before you go into this soft, gentle, calm.
That made you think.
And then telling me that you need to wait for your wife. I'm thinking, I don't need to wait for my wife. You can tell me. And these clips was thinking, this ain't good. But they couldn't tell me at the time, because obviously they'd found something, a tumour. And they took biopsies, which wasn't very nice. And they said, well, it could be benign, it could be nothing. If it is, we'll just cut it out, we'll be done with it. So we had to wait for the results of that, and that's horrible, having to wait to find out whether you've got cancer. I remember being told, and the doctor told me, and it was just like, oh. Case of, well, how do we tell the kids? When do we tell the kids? Do we have to wait and see if anything else happens before? And I was like, I've got to tell my mum. I've got, my mum's got cancer now. On the 19th of December, I've been diagnosed just before Christmas. I was thinking, yay, happy Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, mum, I've got cancer, and it was just rocked our world completely.
Yeah,
and
understandably.
As a parent, finding out your youngest has got a disease it's hard enough dealing with it yourself, but then double whammy.
And so you've been having the treatment kind of, is it from January time? You had, was it a surgery you had then, and did, I think you said to me yesterday that at that point they told you that actually the tumour had been so slow growing that it had probably been growing for about 10 years, just unnoticed, not affecting, which just seems just crazy really to think, isn't it? Yeah. But they've done the surgery and that's gone well. Well, it has gone well. I mean, it was a bit of a journey going through it. A few complications. I had a stoma, which is like a colostomy, but on the other side. And that got blocked and twisted, and I ended up getting a couple of infections, urosepsis, on top of all the other surgeries. Like you don't need anything else. Yeah.
Come on, and all I kept thinking was, one of the first things someone said to me when you first become a Christian, they said, you're going to be tested. You're going to be tested. It's not going to be easy. And I just kept thinking, really?
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah. Have you not got any easier tests I could do?
Am I that strong that you can do? You're going to break me, but I haven't broken, and that's through prayer. I think definitely. The old me, and I refer to the old me, would have probably tried to bury it or just gone off the rails and not been able to cope with it very well. But when you've got something so bad or so sort of life-threatening or life-changing happen to you, and I think I said to you briefly yesterday that no amount of money or anything in the world, no possession, nothing can change the dilemma you're in. What have you got? And I've got Jesus. Yeah.
I think, like you said, you did say it wouldn't have mattered at that point if you were a millionaire. No. At that point, you've got nothing else. Your money doesn't mean anything, and that's all you've got is Jesus. And people who are watching at home be able to see, but for those listening on the podcast, I mean, you're a big guy. You're kind of, big strong guy. You're all, I don't know how tall you are, 6 foot odd something.
6'4".
6'4". Yeah, there you go. So what was it like then? Because you are this big strong guy. What was it like to have an illness which actually kind of really robs you of your strength?
It's scary because I've relied on my physicality, my physical attributes that helped me in my career and things I've done, and that are all gone. You know, I lost 12 kilos, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror, just thinking, "Where am I?" And it's just this gaunt shadow of a person, and that scared me massively. And since that, coming out of the surgery and trying to get strong, obviously I started chemo in April, and that's been ongoing, and it still is till the end of September. But I still don't feel as strong or as fit as I was before, and I think mentally there's a certain vulnerability that comes with that, because you feel like the armour's gone, or my defence mechanism's gone. I've got nothing left. Yeah. Which seems quite shallow to think that.
But I mean, we all do it though. That's it. We all have those things, whether it's our physical health or whatever it is. We've all got those things, you know, our mental faculties.
We rely on. They're the things we rely on.
We place our identity in those.
Yeah. But all that had gone, and in some respects it still has mentally. And I've been coping, not badly, but I've been seeking counselling through work, and that was ongoing from Grenfell for a number of issues. Sure. But the latest one was we've triggered it or pinpointed it to me feeling vulnerable, or vulnerability.
And do you think there's a sense in which, in a way, I mean, obviously it's a very difficult thing, but in a way, God has been able to use that to in a sense, make you more rely more on Jesus through that? Because maybe the instinct would be to think, well, I am strong, I know I'm strong, I can get through this, and almost rely on ourselves. But having that stripped away, like you say, you've got nothing but Jesus. I think that's kind of part of that.
Definitely. I remember praying hard in hospital because I started getting anxious and pet up, and had a rough time when I had the urosepsis. I was in a pretty bad way, and just remember praying hard, saying, "Lord, just please give me a sense of calm, sense of peace. Let me deal with this. Just calm me down and let me just get through this." And all through it, since that prayer, and it's not the only time I've prayed that. I've prayed it a few times, and uncannily, I have had a sense of peace. And people say to me, "Oh, your world's been rocked. This is crazy. You know, you've got cancer." Like, yeah, I have. But that, you know, I have. But I've just dealt with it.
And so, like, I mean, really, your faith is, you know, it's really helped you through this time. Actually,
it has.
I think it's been
definitely
a thing that's given you strength, and
not just me, the whole family. You know, we've all prayed and lent on and used our faith to keep us strong.
And it's still an ongoing thing. So I mean, you've still got a bit more chemo to do and stuff, a couple of cycles left, but the prognosis is generally good. They're very positive at the moment and stuff, which is...
There's always, you know, the risk of it coming back, but they do tests continually. I mean, for the rest of my life, probably. Yeah. They say after 5 years you're deemed to be clear, so the next 5 years it'll be okay. Well, what's this year going to bring? But from being off, and I praise God that I've had the time to spend with my family, and work has been amazing to give me that opportunity to rest. Have I rested? I've tried to rest, tried to do as I'm told. But it's given me time with the family massively, to spend time with them, and you know, and when you're healthy and fit, enjoy what you've got. Yeah. When you can.
Luke, thank you so much for coming and sharing. I think my camera with both of us has crashed, so the good news is you just get Luke. If you're at home watching this, you get all the good stuff there. That's the Hoff right there. So
wish I never said that. Yes,
I am still here. Luke, thank you for coming. Not only for stepping in at the last minute, but actually, it's not easy, I guess, to come and talk about some of these things, because it has, like you say, it's something in a sense is very vulnerable. And you know, thank you for coming and being so open about it. And just, you know, if people are kind of watching at home, listening at home, you know, we hope it's really helpful for you to hear this stuff and encourages you, or you know, others who it can be shared with. So please do pass it on. Next week I'm going to be talking to Steve Rees, who is the vicar of All Saints Crowborough, and we're going to be chatting a bit about his testimony, kind of as we do with everyone, but also I'm really keen to chat to him a bit about what it's like being a vicar in a large church, and his thoughts on kind of evangelism in that setting, because there's we'll get into that next week. So Luke, thank you so much for joining us. Guys at home, we hope you've enjoyed listening or watching, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks very much. Bye.